Welcome to Season 7 of Risk Engineers Talk Governance. In this first episode, due diligence engineers Richard Robinson and Gaye discuss the overall theme of the season, which is SFAIRP, moral imperative versus commercial reality. We hope you enjoy the chat. If you do, please support our work and give us a rating and subscribe on your favourite podcast platform. And if you'd like more information on R2A or have any feedback or topic ideas, head to the website r2a.com.au, where you can also sign up to our newsletter and purchase our books.
Hi Richard, welcome to another season 7 of podcasts.
Happy New Year, Gaye.
Happy New Year. Yes, we're well and truly in the thick of it, aren't we? We just had a discussion this morning about what we were actually going to call this season after, 6 seasons already, and is there anything else that we can particularly cover? And I think one of the key things that came out of our event last year was the difficulty or the challenges that SFAIRP bring to an organisation. So we've titled this particular season SFAIRP, Moral Imperative and Commercial Reality. And I think the key out of this was SFAIRP's hard.
SFAIRP's hard because the first part of it is, and that's what our lawyer at our session basically said, it's so far as you can, not so far as you want, not so far as you think you can afford or your client can afford, it's so far as you can. Mm. And that's a moral imperative in a very Kantian sense. We might have a chance to talk about it in this podcast season.
We might. Some of your favourite rants that you like to go
yes,
talk
we
about.
might get into the groundwork of the metaphysical morals, a small tome that he wrote in order to clarify and explain to people what his critique of pure reason was actually about.
It's all right, audience. I'll give you a warning before we do that podcast. I think that's about it. And some of the things that we've sort of been asked questions about is, and part of that is testing the optimum bias.
Yep.
The question a couple of times we got asked during the event was, we don't actually have the money to do this, so how do we justify not doing something?
Yes.
And then how much money do we need to spend on it? So as we said, the moral imperative versus the commercial reality, there's a lot of things that input into that decision.
And we've read lots of lawyers who said that, and it's one of those questions I was puzzled about. They keep saying that SFAIRP is an objective test. Now, objective to whom? Because if you say you have a limited amount of money and you just can't afford it, that I would have thought on one level was an objective test. But when they mean objective test, they mean objective test as determined by the courts. And the legal
system. After the fact, though.
Well, very often after the fact. Well, although the lawyers obviously think it's an objective test before the fact too, because and that's from a design imperative. Mm. But that then led on to the one which, of course, which we've seen a fair bit of, is that during the design process, they don't consider the elimination option early in the design process when obviously it's the most cost effective.
Correct.
Because if you come up with a possible elimination option when you got down to the final design,
it's never going to be SFAIRP.
Because it's just going to be too expensive to go back and redesign the whole thing.
I think that is another topic for a podcast, is that whole safety in design and what that actually means. I think it's almost got to the point of like HAZOPs and HAZIDs and things like that. It's got a terminology around it and a particular process that people say this is the safety in design process, rather than it being, or application or technique, rather than it being a process to think through what all those high-level critical hazards are.
Yeah, well, I think the point I don't know if it's really quite deliberate, but if you have that view that a HAZOP, and a HAZOP from our point of view is late in the design process when the design's more or less fixed and you're testing, in a very real sense, more for operability than critical hazards, which you should have dealt with
well
design.
Long ago.
But you sometimes start to think that it's actually been a deliberate. We don't know that, and we're not saying that's the case, but you sometimes get the feeling it's been deliberate, a feeling that it might have been deliberate because they knew that if they did think about it early, they would have had to have done it another way.
Other things about it.
Yeah.
And I think that's another one, isn't it? Delaying decisions so that an option is no longer SFAIRP, and we've seen that in a number of cases. And organisations are grappling with that, or engineers are grappling with that. We delay the decision so long, and as you said, the design's moved on from being preliminary design to more a detailed design. And of course, you're never going to get, very rarely do you get the elimination option up at a detailed design stage.
You might recall our experience with the Australian Government Solicitor and Western Sydney Airport, and whether it should be in Western Sydney at all.
Yes, you were game to ask that question. Should we move the airport? And the answer was very quickly, no, it is where it is, and that is it. The options are no.
But the minister basically decided that, which the minister's entitled to do. But if you were just doing it from an engineering viewpoint, you wouldn't put it there, you would put it in Canberra.
So there's the elimination option. One of Richard's favourite things, and I think a topic that's becoming more and more relevant, and we're seeing more of it, is AI and the human effort required to verify maybe AI and what it does for you. So I think we'll do a session on AI.
Likely the next session, I suspect, if you haven't been preparing.
Yes.
Just to give you an indication of how ill-prepared for these things Gaye is, she's got a holiday in New Zealand booked, but she hasn't got accommodation yet.
Now you're really telling all my secrets. I don't know about that. People have said they like the naturalness of our podcast, Richard, how they just flow. Now I'm stuck for words because you tripped me up. Another thing we're going to talk about is ignorance is endemic, and that
actually flows on to, remember I told you when I was running some courses at RMIT and I was running undergraduate courses in, I think it was the maker and the maid, I think it was, RMIT had this thing about they should humanitise engineers in some way by giving them one subject.
Right.
And I remember one of the fourth year students looking at me after we'd done this blast. It was a fourth year engineering student because we had a combination of art students and all sorts of interesting people in the room. And one of the fourth year engineering students looked at me and said something along the line, "You might all be born creative, but you can be trained out of it," which I thought was a reference on engineering education.
And maybe that's what the SFAIRP provisions of the WHS legislation is trying to do. It's trying to get that creativity back into and the innovation back into engineering.
Design.
And into design.
I can remember as a mechanical engineering student, design was always about creativity.
Right.
And you have these sort of kids coming up with absolutely weird ideas, like some guy was having a hard time for his project for the year. And automatic sprinklers normally do a circle,
Yeah.
but most yards are square.
Yeah.
So he designed he designed a sprinkler that would actually do a square.
That's sort of cool.
And
I've never seen one.
It's such an obvious thing to do. And this guy just dreamed it up in a week.
He didn't obviously have the marketing tools that he needed to keep it going, though.
I have no idea what happened to it.
Okay, that little section may need to be a little bit edited by our producer. So, and now we'll continue. A couple of other topics that we're going to talk about, and it sort of fits in this whole SFAIRP moral imperative and commercial reality. It's about integration of the risk curve.
Yeah, that's right. I'll mathematically how to show it, but basically if you just spot the dot on a typical risk curve, the integrated area under the risk curve is probably a factor of 2 at least. Greater than that, you've understated the risk badly.
Yeah. And I think gone blank. What was the last one that we said?
That rolls onto risk language.
That's right.
Words, numbers, and pictures and so forth, which is the threat barrier diagrams and so forth, because that's really the question of large language model AIs, which I think is probably the next one we're going to do, much to Gaye's surprise.
It is. But I also think that there's additional confusion coming into the language of risk, and it's becoming more robust isn't the right word, but people are using certain terms to only mean certain things. And so there's a terminology and a way that people are using the risk language that hasn't got any discussion in it anymore.
That's right, I agree. And it's particularly frustrating. I mean, our legal system is using risk in a peculiar way as far as we can tell. But that probably needs enlarging on too. But again, that session on risk language will be quite an interesting session.
I think just going to the language thing, and that was one of the key takeaways from our event last year, especially when Joe talked to us, was use the terminology. If you're going to do a health and safety review in line with the WHS and OHS legislation, make sure you use the terminology that's in the legislation.
Correct. There's no point using any other term.
You know, and we're even talking about the simple thing of leaving the I out of SFAIRP.
Yep.
We see a lot of people just summarise it as SFAIRP without the I, and Joe really went into, and we've been into the importance of the I in other podcasts.
Yeah, it's as is when the time at which you make the decision. But again, and that's the reason why people can do something late in the design process, which means at that time it's no longer. Whereas if you'd done it earlier, it would have.
Exactly. So I think with our podcast sessions, like everything, we're going to take some of the questions that we've taken from the event. Also, Richard and I do a lot of courses through Engineering Education Australia, and we get a lot of questions in that. So we sort of want to try and make this session more about the practical problem solving. I think in our newsletter we've got a little corner called Q&A with R2A, and so this is sort of an extension of that. And we've also had some nice notes come back in our email system, and Richard got one on the weekend from the AMPI pilots inviting him to deliver a conference paper in for their upcoming conference in Darwin, but saying that he finds our podcast, our excellent podcast, and enjoying it very much. So if anyone else has got any questions out there, we would be happy to receive them either via the chat or via email. So I think there's a lot to unpack in this season. Just recapping, it's sort of SFAIRP, the moral imperative versus the commercial reality, and I think that there's some headbutting in that space right at the moment, and it's a very difficult problem to solve for organisations.
Yeah, I think I've got one currently I'm trying to sort out, and I think the client's not going to be very happy as a result, but that's all I can do.
Yeah, and that puts engineers in a very, very difficult position as well, because, you know, you've been asked to do something and paid to do something by a client, and, you know, the discussion about, you know, do engineers have to walk away from some of these questions?
Yes.
That was very short and sharp. So
Yes.
We're looking forward to delivering this season. We hope you can join us next time. But thanks, Richard, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Gaye.